Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host tonight. I am the Assistant Director for NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, North Carolina. I'm so glad y'all are here. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building conversations and really building community around the topic of mental health. Tonight, we'll be talking with a mother-son duo, Wanda and Tait Robinson. Their loved one, John, that was Wanda's son, Tait's brother, struggled with panic attacks, anxiety, depression, major depression. In 2018, John died in his sleep at the very young age of 43. That's just way too soon to lose a loved one. Since then, 2018, Wanda and Tait have turned their grief into fuel. It has propelled them as mental health advocates and, in Tait's case, as a runner. Tait has literally run hundreds of miles to get people talking about mental health and also to benefit NAMI. As his mother, Wanda, has been the wind beneath his wings. She's been organizing and promoting those events. So I'm so glad y'all are here with us tonight. We're going to hear the full story in just a moment. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guests. That will be followed by a video of the week, and then we'll be taking questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience and Facebook friends watching the live video stream. So now I've got a quick word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. We're very grateful for their guidance and support. They've been very, very helpful to us. So now I'm so pleased again to introduce this mother-son team. Tait is the father of two teenagers who describe him. Wanda gave me some great quotes as the strongest father figure I could ever have, as well as funny, awesome, and a good friend. I don't know, I don't know a lot of families where teenagers are giving their dad that kind of review, so that's amazing. Wanda is a practicing registered nurse with 46 years of experience as a caretaker. She says she was disappointed she couldn't prevent the deaths of her husband in 2010 and her oldest son in 2018. That is a lot, wow. But you've done so much. You've done so much good and lifted up so many other people along the way in your response to that. So I want to thank you both for being here. And we'll go ahead and jump right in. We always like to know the background of our guests. So maybe you could give us your stories in a nutshell, whichever order you prefer.
All right. Well, I'll go first. My name is Tait Robinson. I'm 43 years old also too. So I'm actually work at Super Sod as a sod farmer. Mostly just a 40-50 hour week like everybody else in the world. And two children, one's 15, one's 16. Ashley is 16 and Cameron is 15. And I have a wife. We've been together, I believe, 18 years, 19 years. I can't remember.
Good long time.
Yeah. And we, like I said, we pretty much do everything as a family. We're weekend warriors. We run a lot together. We hike a lot together. We go to the beach. There's not one weekend that we don't do something together. So even family dinners is 3 out of 5 weekdays. So we stick together pretty good.
All right. Thank you, Tait.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Wanda Robinson, and I'm mother of John, and he was my oldest son, and Tait is my youngest son. Very proud of both boys. They are awesome sons. I've been described as resilient because I've been through a lot of grief and lots of trauma with my husband dying at a young age in 2010, and then with John dying in 2018. But, try to keep a positive output, keep putting one foot in front of the other. I recently moved to North Carolina and to be closer to my son and daughter-in-law and 2 grandchildren. And it's worked out very well, and really enjoying being around their busy family. And I enjoy the mild weather. So I have participated with NAMI for over 20 years. I took training for legislative advocacy, and I've attended a family support group for over 20 years. I even continued to attend the support group after John died. And so I've always gotten a lot of comfort and a lot of education and lots of support from NAMI. So I appreciate that.
Well, that's wonderful. And you gave me a lovely segue to mention that NAMI's family support group is there for anyone who has a loved one with a mental health condition. We know that mental illness affects the whole family. It doesn't affect just the one person, but everyone is adjusting and coping and really having to think differently, and we can come together and find wisdom and grace and help each other out. So another question for both of you. Your family member, John, struggled with panic attacks, anxiety, major depression, ultimately. What were some of the signs and symptoms that you saw along the way?
Okay. Well, as a mother, I saw the panic attacks in that he would have to go outside to get air. He would just be almost like claustrophobic. He actually went to the family doctor and was prescribed antibiotics, and they gave him a prescription for 6 weeks, but his psychiatrist appointment was not until 9 weeks. And so then he had to go back. And of course, they were hesitant to renew a prescription for an antidepressant when he hadn't seen the psychiatrist yet. So it was just kind of a break in the system. He did have a history of smoking marijuana. He was a binge drinker in college, in the fraternity. He did have some problems in college, but what he described wasn't really the problem. And as parents, we didn't see that. We would fix what he said the problem was, and that wasn't actually. He got to the point where he had large anger outbursts at work, and he was unable to perform duties at work, like in a mailroom. He failed voc rehab 5 times. He became psychotic, and he assaulted his father. He eventually took off, left the truck at an airport, and we didn't know where he was for 2 weeks, and he called us from Hawaii. And so we had a very long 2 weeks. We didn't know where he was. Well, Tait, what are some of the things that you noticed?
Like I said, going back to the easiest thing, the symptoms that I saw, right in the beginning when it started to happen. He was 18, 19 years old, just going off to college. And I would get to see him, once a month when he came home, or I go out there to college and see him. And then actually when he, and I could see something was wrong. There was, he was by himself a lot, didn't have a lot of friends. And like I said, he was being isolated and a little off, there's just something wrong. When he did drop out of college and come live at home, that's when it really, you could really see it, where he spent a lot of time in his bedroom. He didn't really know what was going on with him. It's hard to pick up on a lot of things. It's really confusing time, and that was the part that, with symptoms and all that. And I didn't know what to think or what to do, or if there was anything wrong with him, at the time. It was just really confusing. It was like, when is he going to get better? And this was before anything was diagnosed, or what was going on. It was just like, why isn't he acting normal? And so, and I was busy. I was a senior in high school, getting ready to go to college, and I had a busy life. I had a lot of things going on. So, I would only catch these things the times I'd see them, and it was just really hard to understand what was going on, until hindsight later, 10 years later, now I understand what's going on. And it's hard to, identify that as it's actually happening.
Absolutely. They say it's hard to see the picture when you're still in it. And John, as I recall, had been athletic. Had he maybe even been class president at one point?
Yeah, he was in a fraternity at MU. He was going to be, he was in photojournalism. And he was an athlete. He was like a soccer player, but he was not that much of an athlete. He liked to play. He liked the social. He liked to be around the team and have all the fun. But he was never really driven by sports.
Yeah,
Okay.
as a brother 3 years younger, he was, he was somebody. I was a freshman in high school. He was a senior, so I looked up to him, and he had a lot of friends, and he, and he was a very social person. That's why, when it did start to happen, I was very confused what was going on.
Yeah.
Why are you acting like this?
Yeah, so that's a radical departure. And that's such a typical thing where the person who just seems to be fine and they're going along and they have their interests and they have their friends and their circle of support, and slowly or sometimes abruptly it just shrinks or disappears, and you've got a whole new situation. So I definitely understand. I can imagine what you were going through at that time. So this question is for you, Wanda. And in the NAMI family to family class, we learn, as we just discussed, that mental illness affects the whole family. There's that ripple effect. What did that look like in your family?
Well, it's interesting to ask that question because there's the movie Silver Linings Playbook, and with Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence. It was a very, very good movie. And I watched that, and it was our house. The chaos and him coming home, him being psychotic, him failing, and all the stress, and taking the picture down off the wall. The dad was, not happy with him. And it was just amazing that looked like, and he got up, the Bradley Cooper's character got up in the middle of the night and was so upset he threw a book through a window and in the middle of the night, and that was our house. And so that movie was very well depicted. So even if people don't want to read about, their situation at home or with mental illness, there's a lot of movies out there that are very well done. So,
right.
Yeah.
That is a great suggestion. Bradley Cooper and I believe Jennifer Lawrence starring in Silver Linings Playbook, highly recommended.
Yes. Yeah. And I never will forget watching The Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. And when he had all those people, and then you realized like 40 minutes into the movie that those weren't real people. And they looked, and I thought they were real. And so I could understand how people would have that, where they have all this paranoia. And so, yeah. So I advise people to watch movies like that, because it really makes sense. And it's just the everyday people that this happens to. Yeah.
Great suggestions. That's Ron Howard directed A Beautiful Mind starring Russell Crowe, and really wonderful depiction, as you said, of schizophrenia, and really uses the tool of cinema to tell the story very, very well. It's
Yes.
riveting. Yeah. Any follow-up from you, Tait?
Like so at that time I was away from home, and so I would get it, as I was trying to build my life in North Carolina. I would just get, I'd get phone calls saying this is what happened,
or I think he got, I remember you telling me where John would call him at 3 o'clock in the morning because John didn't sleep well. Well, he had to be up at 5 o'clock to go to work. And finally, he just had to tell his brother, look, don't call me anymore because I have to get up and go to work. And, you don't work. And so he had to kind of push John, not push him away, but make boundaries. So,
Mm-hmm.
And I was always too, as like I said, at that point I knew there was a lot of trouble and chaos and drama, and the only thing I could really do was comfort him from 1,000 miles away. So really, like I said, that when he called, and I would talk to him for a little bit, but and then the next day I would call him at 8 o'clock in the morning and be like, hey, I want to finish this conversation, and he'd be asleep. But that was the only thing I could really do was just try to make him feel comfortable and listen to him. and you know, a lot of things he said, you know, didn't make any sense, but you know, I wouldn't really question it. I would just make sure that he felt comfortable around me. So that was kind of my role, being so far away.
That answer just contains so much great information. The thing that you did as a brother was to accept him unconditionally, that your goal was just that he would feel accepted and that he knew you were there for him. And you were taking care of yourself. I need to sleep during these hours. I'm going to set this boundary because I can't pour from an empty cup. I have to take care of me. So really good stuff in those answers. Thank you both. And it sounds like John was very blessed in the family department. It really does. Tate, this question is for you. After your brother died, you combined grieving with a huge challenge, literally running across the state of Missouri to raise awareness of mental illness. What led you to do that? How did you make that decision?
Well, I, you know, as, you know, dealing with a lot of the things with, like I said, my dad having heart problems and a heart transplant, and dealing with John, my brother, with all that, and then dealing with work and raising a family, you know, my only escape and time to kind of focus on myself was to run. And so I started off with, you know, marathons, and then I got into ultra marathons and started running farther. And you know, I actually did one across the state of Tennessee that was 314 miles.
Oh.
And then I did another one that was across North Carolina and 380 miles. And those two were for myself. I did those just to see if I could do it. And I did them both, and it was amazing. And from there it was, what can I do? My brother, you know, John had just died. And so I had come up with, let me do one for him. And this will be, you know, a time that I can, you know, spend a week with my brother. And so I started in East St. Louis, or just on the other side of the Mississippi River, and ran over to the Katy Trail and ran down the Katy Trail to the Rock Island Spur, and then to Kansas City, which is 320 miles. And I did that. Yeah, I did that just to, you know, just to raise awareness. And we started a Facebook charity group, and we that really went well. I wasn't expecting it to do so well, but you know, I have a lot of friends in Kansas City, high school friends and Facebook friends like that. So they really got on board with it, and they thought it was a great idea. And so we got to raise a lot of awareness. And my most goal, and I think my mom too, was you know, just basically you know, when somebody stops and sees you and you're at, you know, wherever on that trail, and this is, where are you coming from? And you say, well, you know, 200 miles back that way. They're like, why? And that's like the perfect segue to say, well, I'm doing this for my brother and NAMI and mental illness. And it's so funny. And my mom will tell you too, that almost every single person that you bring up mental illness on a personal note, everybody's got a story about something. You know, I've got a brother, I've got a cousin, my mom, you know, whatever it was, you know, they were, everybody's got a story somewhere, you know, and even if it's not, you know, family wrecking, you know, severe mental illness, it can still be just mild depression where you're just not happy, you know, and that's you know, that's still something to deal with. So, and you know, just trying to get that out there.
That's great. Nice comments in the chat box. This is so strong and powerful from Bria. Thank you for raising awareness from Gail. So I appreciate all that you're doing. And I know, Wanda, you were very active behind the scenes, maybe with promotion. Tell me about how that all worked for you.
Well, like you say, it gave us a week just kind of concentrate on the memory of John. It gave Tate and I a week, because at this point I lived in Missouri and he lived in North Carolina. So it gave us a week, the two of us, and we had a goal, and we would plan each day out of how far we wanted to get. And I would pick him up. And of course, as a nurse, I'm a caregiver and I'm a mother. And so it just thrilled me to death to, bring him, food and pick him up and take him someplace else to get something, or, because you couldn't sleep overnight on the KW Trail. So I had to pick him up and take him to a motel, and then get up at 1:30 in the morning and take him back out. And so it was good for the two of us that we had that time, for our grieving, because we both grieve differently in the family. And so it worked out very well. But like he said, the people that I met along the way, they were having trauma that day, and they would hand me money. And I'm like, well, no, we're really not focusing on the fundraiser. But we ended up, had a $3,300 donation for NAMI. And we never expect, I think our goal was probably $150 or something. We were just overwhelmed. And then you got all that from Facebook. Tate would put posts, and he would have pictures, and then people would, support us, and they would remember things about John. And so the week was just amazing. It was great.
So you were a one-person crew, a one-person
Yes, I was
event
the crew.
manager.
Which is odd. Normally when he runs, he doesn't run with a crew. He just is out there. And because he was by himself, it made sense that I go along and that we do this together. So, yeah.
Wow, I can't think of a better way to offer tribute and honor someone's memory than to spend that time and have that impact and awareness. So,
yeah. One little comment I'd like to say is, like when you do these big long runs and you become mentally and physically exhausted, it kind of shed a lot of barriers that you kind of, hold for, being in the real world, and your normal defenses to stay focused on your job or whatever you got to do. And usually after about 2 or 3 days of running like that and being on your own, it will take you down to a level where you can express your emotions a little bit easier, just because you're not focused on work, or you really get down to the basic, like food, water. Hopefully there's a bathroom nearby. I've got 50 miles to run today, and then I got to get up and run 50 more tomorrow, and during that week, it rained all day from Jeff City to, I can't remember where I went to, and then it rained all day, and then it started to snow that night. And I got to the hotel at 9 o'clock at night, and there was about 2 inches of snow on the ground in the morning. And I had to get up at 4 in the morning and start all over again, and this mentally, things like that will, it'll get you thinking about, thinking correctly, what's really important in life. So they've helped me immensely on, not so much worrying about, what happened to my brother, but to be able to help other people understand that, there's a process to dealing with this stuff. And, it's a lot of it, it's just being grateful for, your own life and your situation on this planet, and trying to help others. But that's pretty much it right there.
wow, it sounds very clarifying. And the word that came to mind for me was spiritual. I don't know if that applies to you. Of course, at NAMI, we respect and honor all beliefs or lack thereof. So, but it does resonate for you in that way.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. When you get, it's 4 in the morning and you run, hundreds of miles and you're absolutely exhausted and you stop and look around and there's absolutely nothing around except for you. It's a humbling experience.
That question from the chat box. We're having a hard time. What resources do you use to cope with your mentally ill family member?
What,
Say that again.
say it again?
Question from someone who's having a hard time with their family member, and they're asking, what resources did you use to cope with your mentally ill family member, with John?
I said, kind of what I said before was, I always tried to play the, my mom she had to be the caregiver and the rule setter and things like that. I always was out of the picture for the most part, but I would, when I did get to spend time with them, I always just tried to make them feel as comfortable as possible. And that helped me feel better about, what he was going through. And that was really the way I coped with it if I can make him feel a little bit better when I have time with him, then that's the best I can do.
So what
I'm not a doctor. I'm not anything like that. I can't help him in any of that regards, but I can be, a brother. I can love him and make him feel comfortable. And that was good enough for me.
That's a big thing. And what I'm hearing is that you accepted him and did not try to fix him.
Yeah, that was definitely and it was kind of to the point where I knew there wasn't much I could do for him.
And see that as a mother, that's kind of where I struggled because, just simple things like he would need a skillet and in the apartment. So he would say, I'd say, do you need a skillet? And he'd say, yes. Well, I would go home and think, okay, if he needs a skillet, then he needs a spatula, and then he needs cooking oil, and then he needs a hot pad, and then he needs soap to wash it with. And I would bring 15 items when all he wanted was a skillet. So I had to be careful that I would sometimes overwhelming. And this brings me to my favorite book by Xavier Amador, in that I'm not sick, I don't need help, because John didn't feel like he was sick. He thought this was his world. And Xavier Amador, when he speaks at the national conferences, he said, he was a psychologist, and he said, I did more harm than good as a brother, because I thought he was sick. And he said they used to argue with each other. And he said, once I let go and was just his brother, then things went much better. But I definitely struggled with that. But I was just working as a guardian on the basic chart. And, I was starting at the bottom of basic human needs. And, just having a safe place to live, having food to eat, and, this kind of stuff, and getting him to the doctor and having him being able to have medicine and stuff like that. I never did get past the first level. I never got all the way up the ladder to self-actualization for John. It just didn't happen. But I had to, the other thing you have to do is you just kind of have to sometimes put humor into it, and just like, well, he's doing he did the best he could with what he had to work with. And so we would, sometimes his personality would come back, and we had this joke between us, because even before he was sick, and then when he got sick, I would read all this stuff and we would try stuff and it wouldn't work. And finally he just said, another 5 myths you have me and Ollie, which is a quote from, the old Laurel and Hardy.
Right.
People, and he would say that in such a way, a reflection of his voice, and we would just laugh, and he would laugh. He just, he would try it, knowing that he wasn't going to be able to do this stuff, but because I asked him, he would try it. So yeah, I don't know that I was the best, but I I think one of my downfalls was I didn't listen as well as I could have. I would hear things, but I wasn't listening. So, but then there again, you have to take care of yourself, so I would still do things with my friends and still take vacations and things like that, knowing that he was, in his apartment alone. So I would just suggest for those families that, it's not a really black and white book out there to tell you exactly what to do. So.
Right. So it sounds like he was fairly accommodating and didn't resist your efforts to help too much. Is that correct?
Yes, I had to be careful as he got sicker. He didn't want me there all the time. Now, when he lived at home, he would be, he would be around and we would go do things together. We'd go to the grocery store together. But as he became an adult in his apartment, I could almost offend him by wanting to come too often. So I had to be careful with that.
I understand. So let's talk a little bit about how young John was when he passed. According to the World Psychiatric Association, folks with severe mental illness die 10 to 20 years earlier than the average bear. It's such a heartbreaking number. And I was surprised a little bit that John died so young because he was surrounded with love and care. So many folks with serious and persistent mental illness end up, maybe they're homeless or they have a lot of interaction with the justice system. It sounds like John had a lot of things going for him. Were you, how shocked were you when he died in his sleep at the age of 43?
Yes, I would consider that I was shocked, but I also felt that what we called our John, he was gone long before he physically died. We had lost John, the personality and who he was, many years before that. So, and he wasn't a chain smoker. He drank Pepsi. He had high blood pressure. He didn't sleep well. He didn't eat regularly. Sometimes
he was a chain smoker?
Yeah.
Yes.
He was.
Yeah. And he had tried 3 times to quit, and then the last clinic we were in, they were under the impression that that's the only thing he has left that gives him joy, let him smoke. And I know that's kind of controversial, and that probably we probably should have worked on that. The other thing is all he did was sit in the chair and smoke and sip. And so all of his teeth fell out. And I think another one of the downsizes with John of dying early too was our family has a nerve deafness, and I wear hearing aids. He should have worn hearing aids, but he didn't. And when I became his guardian, I went to the clinic with him, and I realized that they would ask him questions and he wouldn't answer. And they thought he was stupid. So they just thought he was non-compliant, and they didn't. And finally I had to say, I don't think he hears you. I think you need to get, or he can read your lip and things like that. And so the only communication they had was through their work phone. Well, he couldn't hear the phone, and he wouldn't talk on the phone because he couldn't hear. So they wouldn't, or even if we came to the door, he lived in an apartment building that was locked, and they had to get permission to get in the entryway so they could get up. And even if he couldn't hear. So I think that that made a big difference because that isolated him. And so he didn't, but yeah, I found out when I was actually visiting my family in Indiana, and that's, even like I said, I couldn't go visit him every day, but I had access as a guardian to his debit card. And so I saw there were 3 days that he did not go to the grocery store. He walked to the grocery store every day, and that was his that's how he'd gotten to the point where it wasn't safe for him to cook anymore. And so I called the Kansas City police for a welfare check, and they found him in bed, and he had probably been there probably over 3 days. And they said there were no signs of trauma or foul play or anything, and he just died. So we're not sure what it was,
Mm,
but he wasn't very healthy.
And like I said, I do have a highly functioning friend that has mental illness, and I know that he talked about, with some of the medicines and the side effects from that that he would get very agitated, and he would need something to calm down. And then if he, or when the medicine would calm him down so much that he would need something to pick him back up. So, and a lot of times I think, John was, he didn't know it, but he was self-medicated himself through nicotine and caffeine. And I think that, that and a poor diet and not being, exercising or anything like that, it took a toll on him pretty fast. So that's the one thing I got from my friend, that, he, as all people with mental illnesses, he really struggled with the medication, because it would make him feel so bad. But if he didn't take it, then he would have trouble at work or with his family. So,
gotcha.
this is really scary cliff that he would walk, and I felt like that with my brother. He was kind of the same way, that, that the medication would really affect a lot of things, one way or the
Right.
other. Yeah.
Right. It's got to be awfully hard on the nervous system to have the mental illness that seems nerve related, and then the meds, the moving up and down with your moods and trying to accommodate and offset that. I guess another thing that comes to mind hearing your answer is that he did have a very loving and accepting family, and he was still very isolated. That's sometimes the nature of mental illness. It's the nature of trying to manage your mood when everything is so difficult, and you're smoking and you're drinking and you just want to be alone. So it is incredibly sad. A lot of supportive comments in the chat box, a lot of empathy there. That's a long, hard journey, and I really admire the way you've handled it.
No, I think that was just, it wasn't something that was a burden or anything like that. It was just that was a natural reaction for us, was just to do what we can, and that's really all you can hope for, is do that, and and be
Sure.
happy with that decision.
Right. Yeah, we have to take life on life's terms, don't we? This question is for you, Tait. I saw this quote in the local paper for Liberty, Missouri. And you're saying, I would run at night and think about John's physical struggle and make the choice to keep going. So what part of John's story inspired you in those moments when you were running and decided to push on?
I think, like I said before, there's from the Tennessee race that was 300 miles long, the North Carolina, I ran basically the whole outer. I ran from all of North Carolina, which was across down the coast, which was Hatteras Island and Ocracoke. And if you've ever been there, there's 25-mile stretches with absolutely nothing. And I got stuck out there in the middle of the night, and it's really scary being out there by yourself, and also having 60, 70 miles on your feet where you feel like, you're not going to make it. And it's a really weird feeling, but you have to trust yourself, and, and being alone, like, you have to kind of comfort, be comfortable in those uncomfortable situations. And that's kind of one of the things, like with my brother, I know he's dealt with much worse than me playing around out in out in the middle of nowhere. So that was kind of one of the things where, if I don't get down on yourself, don't feel isolated, or there's people out there much worse than things that I'm doing. It's just that's kind of what I got, was just there's
Sure.
being alone and being out there is everybody's got a story like that. But
Yeah.
if you can fight through it, and the dawn comes up, it's usually wasn't really all that bad. Even though you think it's pretty much the end. I mean, you will if you keep fighting, you will see the dawn, you will see the next day.
Well, I think being stuck alone in the dark is not a bad metaphor for mental illness at many, certain situations, I guess, moments of mental illness, not the whole kit and caboodle. Interesting. So I think we're almost at the halfway point of the show. We're going to pivot and check out our video of the week. We usually go with something lighthearted for our video of the week because our conversations aren't always lighthearted. First, I want to thank all the folks working so hard behind the scene. Bria Motley, our student work study person and wonderful volunteer, psychiatric nurse Gail Pruitt on Facebook, and Executive Director Gary Kreitz for always being there. Of course, thank you so much to Tait and Wanda for sharing your evening with us. And I'm going to check out this video. This is Roxy Morrison. Since we're getting into fall, I thought I would go ahead and show this fall video of Roxy just out having fun. Oh, I just can't get enough of that one. All right. Yeah, thank you. That was Roxy. We used to have this volunteer who would make fabulous videos, based on our little home thing. So thanks to Eddie Simmons for putting that together. Now we're going to move on to questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience and live on Facebook. We've got a couple queued up here. And first one is from Gary. What advice would you give to a parent whose child is cycling down and down and the long-term prognosis does not seem good?
Well, let's see.
Yeah, I didn't say they'd be easy questions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gosh.
Well, I think too that they always told me that, when John would spiral down and we had thought we had done everything, they said, well, the decisions you made that day with the information you had, that was the best decision you made. And that's kind of what you have to go with, that even though, things don't always work out, what you did that one day and, you tried to make it better, that's the best you could have done. So.
Yeah, so I have a friend, like I said, the highly motivated friend that I have that has mental illness. I like to call it, he rides a roller coaster ride. So, one minute he's very high functioning and he's happy and everything's going great. And you can watch the roller coaster as he's getting to the top, and then all of a sudden he starts to plummet down. And as a, I would say anybody that is dealing with like long-term thing is those roller coaster rides happen over and over and over. And you know, one minute they're at the top of the world, next minute they're in the deepest, darkest hole that you could ever think of. And you know, as a friend, I mean, the only way I can deal with that is like try to be as steady as a rock as I can. At least he knows he can come over, and you know, whether he's severely depressed or you know ready to you know tackle the world, I usually try to stay, you know, it's like, you know, either help him up or pull him back down a little bit, you know, and try to keep him as even as I can. I don't know if that answers that question, but I think, you know, as a person dealing with somebody with long term, it's you know.
Yeah, it is very challenging. And something that comes to mind for me right now, Wanda, is when you were discouraged, Tait knew just what to say to you. Do you know what I'm talking about? The words he would say, "Mom, it's not your fault."
Oh, yeah, yeah. Because I think it was one time when John was admitted to the hospital, and it was always a crisis situation. A lot of times the police were involved, or CIT officers came, you know. And so I would try to I tried to be truthful with Tait and let him know, you know, what was going on and things like that. And I would just go ta-da-da-da-da-da-da on the phone, and he'd say, "Mom, it's not your fault." And then I would go, "Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da," and then he'd say, "Mom, it's not your fault." And then I would go, "Da-da-da-da-da," and he had to accentuate every one of those words and tell me 5 times before I heard what he was saying, because I was out here just spinning out of control and thinking the worst, and oh my gosh, everything was gone. But Tait was that quote for me really helped me, you know, that it wasn't my fault. And I was, you know, as a mother, that's what we do. We try to be guilty and you know, try to fix things. But that was the most comforting thing that I think that Tait has ever said to me. So yeah.
Yeah, it's
Go ahead,
hard to, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, yeah, I lost my comments. It's you know, if you're not happy with yourself, or you know, as a person, you can't help somebody else. So it's one of them things where you know you have to, you know, to help somebody else, you need to be healthy and strong and show them that you know you're there for them no matter what. And if you can't do that, then you know that's a you know that's kind of the way I've always seen it. So I don't know how to explain that any better than that.
Well, I think it points to self-care. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, then we can't do anything for the next person. The story resonated so much. I really like that story because I think so many of us, when things go wrong with our loved one, our head just starts spinning and the self-talk, it becomes very fast, and we don't realize we're blaming ourselves. We don't realize that that's what the thought is doing, is sort of chewing on that anxiety of what have I done, or what could I have done, what should I have done, because somehow it's my fault that we landed here. A lot of us just have that inner voice, that reaction to a crisis. So thank you for that story. Next question. Other than running, what are things that you both do for self-care? Back to self-care again.
Well, I just bought a stand-up paddleboard. Like I said, we live 2.5 hours away from the ocean. So me, my wife, and my 2 kids, we go to the beach, and I've been doing a lot of stand-up paddling in the ocean, learning how to relearn how to surf again, since I hadn't done it since I was a little kid, or you know, a teenager. And then on top of that, you know, also we have the mountains, which is 3 hours away. So we've been doing a ton of hiking on the weekends. If we're not hiking, you know, we've had 2 dogs also, so we'll take them out for walks on the weekends. We did a race in Rockingham, North Carolina called Henson Lake 24-hour run, and the whole family did that. We spent the whole weekend out there running till exhaustion. But self-care, a lot of things we do revolve around, you know, physical things, and trying to stay healthy, because that's the one thing that's always worked for me, especially with you know, like depression or, you know, feeling bad about yourself, is to stay healthy and run or exercise any of those bad feelings out. So that's that, and it's kind of become a trend with our family. I mean, we weekend warrior almost every weekend. So
I have a friend, now we don't condone this particular C word at NAMI, but I have a friend who refers to that as burning off the crazy.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how about you, Wanda? What's your self-care look like?
Well, since I've moved and with the pandemic, you know, I was coming over here to do all these fun things, and things have pretty well been shut down, but I got a house that needs some work. And so I've been busy, you know, trying to fit all of my stuff from Missouri after I pitched a bunch of stuff, trying to get it to fit into this house, and trying to do some updating on the house and things like that. And they have a really good group here called Newcomers, and they have coffees and days out for lunch and travel groups and different things like that. So I've tried to participate where I can meet some new friends. But, you know, with my old friends in Missouri, we do a lot of Zoom, where we'll Zoom each other, and that way we can see one another. And I had a small group at church that we just had our last meeting Tuesday, where they are going to go on without me, and I'm just going to get into a local congregation here. So, but other than that, I'd love to travel. So I'm waiting for the pandemic to straighten out so that I can travel again. So.
All right. So clearly we've got support from other people on the one hand, and support through physical activity, self-care through physical activity on the other. Those are both wonderful. Wanda, how did you find the newcomers group?
How what?
How did you find the newcomers group?
Actually, I was in the real estate office, and when we were corporate gypsies. We moved like every 2 to 5 years with the company. And so when we were in Omaha, Nebraska, they were called New Neighbors. And it was just a group mainly of women that got together. And this group is men and women. And I think they have like 500 people, because a lot of people move, and they can stay in the group for like 3 days, 3 years. But it was just a little flyer that was in the real estate office. And so I paid my little dues, and every Thursday morning I go to a park and we have coffee together. And then if you need a painter, they'll say, has anybody painted their house? And then people will say, you know, or I went out to eat somewhere else. And I went to a breakfast and I sat next to a lady, and she had just moved here. So we're getting to be friends, because she called me last week and said, well, I'm not coming to coffee, but I will be there this week. Well, she didn't show up. So then I called her and I said, are you okay? And she said, yeah, I'll be there next week. So we're beginning a friendship. So
Nice.
it's an easy way to meet friends. Yeah.
Nice. Next question is for Wanda. How has your experience with John affected your nursing style?
My nursing style?
Interesting question, huh?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of what I started this. My husband actually got sick when he was 43 with a heart problem and had congestive heart failure. He had a problem with Agent Orange from Vietnam and eventually had a heart transplant. And we made a deal that I would not be his nurse. I would be his wife. And that's how we kind of survived over those 19 years that he was ill before he died. And although I was kind of passive aggressive in that I would call the cardiac nurse and say, hey, he's coughing. I think he needs to come in. So I could do it kind of underhanded. With John, the mental health field is such a different arena. And you cannot, what I found as a guardian and as a family member, it was very difficult to work through. And I just kept plugging away, but
What specifically was difficult, may I ask?
well, just like going to the clinic. When John would first go, I went in and his social worker would be with him, and the social worker would be working on the iPad and picking up emails, waiting for their appointment, and because John couldn't hear, they didn't talk to him. So there was like 20-30 minutes they could have been really focusing on him. And so John would just kind of lower his head, and then you had to be very careful in the clinic because then you were considered aggressive. And so if you waited 30 minutes and you went up to check to see that, they didn't like that. So what I noticed for me, as the longer I went, I looked just like John. I sat in the chair and I kept my head down. And I actually had a psychiatrist to get in my face and scream at me. And that had never happened to me in the medical, in my medical career as a nurse. I'd never
Good
had that
grief.
happen. So it was very difficult to work through. So I had to be very creative,
What happened before the psychiatrist screamed in your face?
John was on Invega, the injections, because he didn't like to take the pills. So he went every 6 weeks. Well, the pharmaceutical rep found out that they were opening up 2 syringes and making divided dosage for his injection. And he said, no, you can't do that because they were aspirating the syringes and putting 2 of the syringes into another syringe. And of course that was charging, so they wanted him to either go down 50 milligrams or go up 80 milligrams. And they gave me the sheet of paper. And the nurse said, take this to the doctor and find out what dosage he wants him to have. And so I went in and I handed them the paper, and I said, I need to know how much, because I said, well, can you talk? I had told the nurse, can you talk to, oh no, we never talk to the doctors. I'm like, okay. He said, you do it. So I went. So we get out into the hallway. And so to clarify it, I said, okay, do you want him to have this much or this much? So I can tell the nurse. And she gets right in my face and she just starts screaming at me. She said, what do you want? Do you want him to have 156 or do you want him to have a 210? Just let me know. Just tell me what you want right now. And just went on. And so I think she'd had a bad day or something. But like I said, I had never experienced that in the medical field. So it's a different world. It's a different world there. So maybe that will get better. So.
Wow.
If John walked, he liked to walk. So I would meet him there. And he walked 2 miles one way to the clinic. And if he would be 10, 15 minutes late, they wouldn't see him that day. Say, well, no, you're late. And then one time we sat in the clinic for 2.5 hours waiting on the doctor. So, it just wasn't always fair, but, life isn't fair. So.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the level of respect was generally low with the mental health services. And I have been told that, especially if someone is receiving community health services, Medicaid, then they really they are expected to be compliant. They're expected to be told when their appointment is. They don't get a lot of input. Hopefully that's changing, but that I've heard
Yeah.
that before.
Well, and that's kind of the reason I want to continue on and to advocate for others. You know, I can't advocate for John anymore, but maybe I can make it better. And I think we just need lots of research, you know, that I always feel a lot better when I go to the national conference, because you hear that there's somebody out there and they're researching, they're trying to make it better. So we've got work to do. Yeah.
Right. You're getting a lot of supportive comments and camaraderie in the chat box. Sounds like the doctor had a God complex, and definitely was a lack of respect. As a nurse, that must have infuriated you. So a lot of good feedback there. Next question is for Tait. Tait, do you ever do shorter runs like the 10K? What do you think about while you run?
Actually, yeah, I do a lot of marathons, and I do some 5Ks and things like that too, especially with my family and things like that. But normally, you know, just a normal run that's, you know, 30 minutes to an hour long. You know, a lot of that is normal, you know, day to day stresses and things like that, just to kind of, you know, kind of hash all that stuff out. The longer runs get a little bit deeper into into your inner demons, I guess you say. But yes, yeah. But most of the short runs are just for what happened that day, just to kind of, you know, as you say, kind of run the crazy out, you know, by the, you know, real quick, just get it out. You know, that helps just to sweat out a lot of those problems just for the day, kind of resets my brain to, you know, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. And just for the record, we don't really use the word crazy. I started it by sharing something that my friend said because it just cracks me up, but it is a stigmatizing word. I should maybe rethink that next time. What is your resting heart rate? I'm curious, Tait.
I'm sure it's funny because you know, back when I first started, I wore a heart monitor, I wore a watch, I tracked how far I ran, and I can't remember the last time I wore a watch or checked my heart rate, but I'm sure it's in the 50s.
Wow. Note from Gary Kreitz, our executive director. Will you be his trainer?
I don't know. I could, if you come to the 24-hour race we did last week, if you saw the food at our race, you would think you were at a family barbecue, because it's pizza and beer and hot wings and potato chips and lots of carbonated drinks. I mean, it's not what you think it's going to be. I actually, it's kind of funny because I'm going to the Kansas City Marathon next weekend, and I don't run a lot of big races, but it was kind of funny because they said that the food they had at the aid stations was runner's goo and Gatorade, and it was like, oh no, I haven't ate a goo in 10 years. I don't know. That may give me, I need like potato chips and a Coke, you know.
And just so people know, goo is this little, it's like frosting. I think it has vitamins and antioxidants, but it comes in a little packet, like a ketchup packet, and you just squirt it into your mouth.
Yeah, it's basically carbohydrates, salt, and some electrolytes, and some and usually a little bit of caffeine in there too. But yeah, if you long distance races and things like that, you really have to take care of your stomach, because you can end up with a pretty bad stomach ache if you're not careful.
Not bad.
But yes, I think I saw something about tofu at the race, and yes, there's always a vegetarian friendly soup or food there for that. So yeah, I can't remember. They had 4 different types of soup at that race at nighttime. Yeah.
All right. So Yeah, points for tofu. That's wonderful. Wonderful news. We have a brief lull in the questions. We still have time, virtual studio audience and Facebook friends. If you would like to pose a question, please type it into the Q&A box. I'll make some quick announcements while we're waiting. Please fill out our survey. Once you close out of this Zoom webinar, a survey will magically appear and you'll have the opportunity to let us know. What did you enjoy about tonight's show? What could we do differently? It helps us improve over time. We really appreciate it if you could give us some feedback. Also, please join us again next week. We'll be speaking with Lloyd Hale, really interesting gentleman in South Carolina. He lives with schizophrenia, and when he was 16, he had a hallucination where his mother said, please, please kill my boyfriend. So he did. How did he evolve? What happened to him after that? Please join us next week to find out. Lloyd Hale, he's a very interesting, well-spoken gentleman, and he's got a lot to teach us. And I don't see other questions coming just yet. Do you have any closing thoughts or closing arguments, Wanda and Tait?
I think, like I said, the closing argument for me, and it's always been the same, you know, since my brother got sick when he was 18 till when he died when he was 43, was this, you know, is to stay positive and work through everything, and then don't, you know, everything's a challenge in life, and then this is no different. You know, it can be anything, and as long as you stay positive and healthy and take care of yourself, that you can also help others and take care of them too.
Well, I think one thing I put on his obituary was that having a mental illness is not a character flaw, it's an illness. And because there's a lot of, when you get conversations out into the community, you hear different stories. I always admired how creative John was with photography. That was one of his things that he did. And then one thing that always people reminded of John was his smile. And I didn't realize it until later. He told me that some days it was a painted on smile. And I said, John, I was your mother. I didn't know the difference. So then I would to the point say, John, you're smiling today. Is that a real one or is it painted on? And sometimes he'd say, oh, it's a real smile. I feel good today. Or he'd say, it's painted on. And I'm like, okay. So thought that was good how he could explain that to me. Yeah. Yeah.
So you've been so effective at taking your situation, taking your grief and moving it into public education, whether it's Tait with running or Wanda, you with the obituary that says mental illness is not a character flaw. It strikes all of us. I just think those messages are so important because the more people understand that, it impacts 1 out of 5 people. I think the more kindness, the more candor, the more healthy, helpful conversations we're going to have. So my hat's off to you both for all that you did for John and all that you did for your community and world in the wake of his death. So you took a very difficult situation and made something beautiful. All right. I think we're at the end of our show. I want to thank again our guests. And quick reminder, we have a wonderful annual conference coming up, NAMI North Carolina's annual conference. Our theme is growth and grace. So much going on in our world these days. It's not easy, so much divisiveness. Join us for conversations about how we can take care of ourselves in these interesting and difficult times. It's Saturday, October 9th. You can find the link on our page, our websites, or our Facebook page, NAMI North Carolina. It's naminc.org. I hope to see you there. We have plenty of scholarships if finances are an issue. Come and check it out. We'll have support groups from 12 to 1 and wonderful sessions from 10 to 3. I do hope to see you there. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you again to Wanda and Tait. It's been wonderful, and I appreciate your sharing all your wisdom with us. Good night, everyone.
Night.
Night.